you've now gone through the training of building that project, putting together the initial information. You've set up a time and gone out and done a site visit, done your measurements, taken your pictures, loaded them in. You've built your specs and selections. You've had it reviewed by the production manager and sales manager. You've presented it to the customer, or while you're presenting to the customer, you're going through it and you're checking all through the specs and selections, making sure that they agree with everything that you put in there, that you covered everything they wanted to do. You've given them that bottom line price, and now you want to get the information into their hands in the form of a proposal. And there's a couple different ways you can go. There's an HCA proposal, and there's an FHC contract. There's a couple of others too that are more specialized, and we'll talk about those later. But the difference between the proposal and the contract is, first of all, there's no signature page on the proposal, and most of the legal mumbo jumbo is not there because it's not a contract. But it does give them the complete down, the rundown of specs and selections. It gives them the bottom line price if that's what the tier that they're at. It also could give them the breakdown labor and material, or by category. It depends on the tier HCA that you sold them. But it's going to show all of that information. Everything that you discussed on the phone call will be in that proposal for them to review. Now, obviously, when we do the HCA review with a customer, we want them to get to sign the contract right then. And that is the goal, and that's something we push for. But there's times when that's not going to happen. It could be that they are purchasing a home and they're not under contract yet. It could be that they still have some choices to make, and I know you learned about choices when we were building the project, and they haven't totally decided on which level they wanted. You went through it on the HCA review. They think they want tier 2, but they really want to take a look at what that means. They want to see what is the difference between that flooring that you can give them in tier 2 and tier 3. What's the difference between the faucets in tier 1 and tier 2? So they're not quite ready to sign, and that means you're going to need to do a follow-up shortly after you do get them the proposal to kind of run through it again and then push it to a contract. But it's not a contract. It could be revised, and they're not signing saying, yes, let's go forward, and this is exactly what I want done, and here's the price. The contract, on the other hand, will have all of that. It will have a signature page. It's going to need to be signed by the customer, and once you have your home improvement sales license, it can be signed by you. In the meantime, it will be your sales manager that'll sign it. And that is signed. There's all the legal stuff is in there, and what the contract means and what's excluded and what's covered. It gives them a breakdown just like the proposal of all the specs and selections. It gives them the pricing based on the tier you sold it to, the allowance page, the choices page that they've made. It gives them the pricing. It's even going to give them the payment schedule down to what we're going to do. Now, there could be a difference there. If it's a cash job, the payment schedule is based on what we need to collect along the way. If it's a 203K or a home style, that is based on draws. So you're not going to have a specific payment schedule. It's going to list there that there's going to be a series of draws that are going to happen, and that's how we get paid. So let's look a little bit at the difference between the two. First thing you need to do, by the way, after you've gone through your HCA review, you do have to go into estimate so that you can make sure that it's updated, because in order to pull the numbers into the proposal or the contract, it has to be updated. And what do I mean by that? So on the estimate page, if you go in there and there's a base price, as you can see here, and it matches this, or it matches this plus some of the choices they've made. So that can get confusing. You see here the estimated total is $38,678.05, but over here it says $38,400.05. Well, this customer actually chose some upgrades from what we initially quoted them. So we're going to have to go back in and we're going to have to change the budget to those upgrades. But for now, they've chosen them. It shows as a choice. The allowance shows on the proposal and the contract, so we're fine leaving it as it is. If this were to say 0 here, you would want to hit update to make sure that it pulls those figures in. Otherwise, none of the numbers will pull into your proposal or your contract. So let's just click on it to see. You'll get a box that pops up, and it's going to ask you, it'll say keep at, and it would say 0 if it was 0, or change to, and it'll have a number, or change to if there was something else you wanted to put in there. At this point, we're not going to talk about that because that's something you typically would not have to do or want to do. You would change it to what you wanted it to be, you'd hit submit, and all of a sudden what you have in there then would show up under this base price and your estimated total. So once that's in there, you're now going to want to go over on the left-hand side, and you're going to want to go to where it says proposals. click on that, and you're going to see, now we have a proposal into this customer already. I'm not going to open those up just because they're all set. You'll see you have one voided, and you see that it's a contract awaiting approval. This was one where the numbers changed in between creating the first contract. She made some additional choices. It changed the dollars. She wanted to add something to it. We voided that contract. We created a new one. But for now, when you would go in, you normally aren't going to see anything here. It's going to be blank. You don't want to click templates, although it will take you over to the template for a proposal. But that's the master template. We don't want to go there. You want to click new. And you will see you have some choices. FHC contract, Hca report, and then the other ones that we talked about. You also could do a blank proposal, but again, there'd be no reason to do that. So we're going to choose this time the Hca report, and you click new proposal. And you're going to get this screen that's going to have on it the basic framework of that proposal. You're going to scroll down and you're going to see that it will pull in the name of the project, the date, the address. Already has our information presented by. It's going to pull in the client name. It's going to pull in any information that is preloaded into CoConstruct will be pulled into that. Don't ever need to change that. It's going to have a little blurb thanking them for choosing us, and the following is a scope and description, and that it is not a contract. Below here, you're going to see that you have some choices. So you're always going to include the specs and selections. You're not going to include just specs and only selections with allowances, or just specs. It's always specs and selections. That's the default. You would just leave that. Below here is where you can make some changes. So if they're a basic $95 Tier 1 home cost analysis, this is the way you want it set up. You want to remove the offer financing because we don't want them to see what's on there, but we do mention financing in the contract with a couple of vendors that we do work with. You would want to show the category subtotals if the customer has gone to a Tier 2, and if they're a Tier 3, you'd want to show the spec and selection subtotals. You'd also want to hide the zeros. If you forgot to take one out and the reviews missed it, you'd want to hide those zeros. So for now, we're going to do that so that we can see what it looks like. But if it were just a Tier 1, you would not show the category subtotals. You wouldn't show the spec and selections. You wouldn't have to hide the zeros. You're just giving them the specs and selections with the totals. As you scroll down, you'll see that there is a selection schedule. If they've selected something, we'd like to show that. And the selection schedule is already preloaded. You just choose that as your heading. You want to show the allowance summary, same thing, that's your heading. And as you scroll down, you'll see that there's a closing page. And here we're talking about, asking us about financing. We don't click the other box because that's a CoConstruct product that we're not currently using. But we do have Hearth, we do have Renovate America, and we'd like them to see that they can choose those things if they'd like some more information. We also say, hey, you're ready to move forward? Ask your consultant to generate a contract so we can get in there. So all of that fills in for itself. We are not including the signature lines. On the contract, we would click that, and it would give 2 spaces to be able to put in both the homeowner, and if there's more than one, it would add a second space, and then someone from here. If you have your home improvement sales license, it can be you. If not, it would be your sales manager. And then you'd want to preview it. We click Save and Preview, and it's going to bring up what the customer is going to see. Now, as you know, you can flip over and preview it the way the client's going to see it, and I suggest you do that. For now, we're not going to do that, but I suggest you do that so you can see exactly what your customer is going to see before you go ahead and send that out. If there's something that needs to be changed on there, you would simply click Edit. It would take you back to where we were, and you can go ahead and make those changes. But let's scroll down. You'll see that it is now filled in the name of the project, the address, all the information, the name of the customer, and now it's going to go through the home cost analysis. All the specs and selections that you reviewed with the customer are going to come up here. And as we scroll down, you'll see that it's filled in. As we move down a little further, you're going to see, now we chose a Tier 3 where they get the breakdown labor and material, and it does give them more information. It doesn't just give them the bottom line price. It gives them the category total, and it gives the subtotals broken down labor material. On a 203K or a home style, the lenders need that information. Now, if the customer didn't pay the $595 and they're only on a Tier 2, they wouldn't get that. They would just get the subtotals for the categories. We would then have to create a second client report to give to the lender because they need it to be actually broken down just the way you're seeing it here. And as you can see, it's all filled in. If there's something that they chose, right, and there's an allowance for that, it shows and highlight what their choice was. A lot of the categories don't have choices because it doesn't make sense. They wouldn't choose the type of drywall they're getting or something like that, but they would choose the type of flooring. In this case, the customer didn't make a choice here yet, so we have a budget in, but that's something they're going to have to go back and choose. And as we scroll down, we can see they declined on this one. They didn't want the Tier 3 hardwood floors they originally chose. That was a change. Can't make it go away, but you can zero it out, and it would show as client declined it. Scrolling down again, you got choices, you got numbers, you get all the way to the bottom. And this is a pretty big one, so it takes a little while. You'll see the base price. That's that $38,405 that we saw on the estimate page. We saw that they had selected something that is an upgrade choice, and that now pushes it up to that $38,678.05 that we saw. So they get to see both of that. They get to see the selection. Right now, they're showing that they still have selections to make for the unfinished hardwood floor, which when you saw when we were scrolling down, there was nothing that was bolded. And they also need to make some choices on the cabinet materials. You also get to see their allowance summary. And this is a good sheet for them to have because we send them out to our vendors. You know, for example, we would send them to our flooring people and say they have X amount of dollars to spend on their flooring, or they have X amount of dollars to spend on their cabinets if they're going out to see our cabinet people. That's a good number for them to have. That's the number before the markups and before any of the overhead is added into the cost. So they're seeing what they can actually spend, and that's a really important page. And then as you scroll down, you'll see exactly what we saw when we were setting it up, and that's it. At that point, if it all looks right, you'd hit send, it would go to the customer, a copy would come to you, and then you would follow up with the customer if you had gotten off the phone at that point, and sometimes you will have gotten off the call. Honestly, you'd want to probably do this while you're on the call so that they could take a quick look, but it can be cumbersome in the beginning, so it's perfectly fine to say, I'm going to complete this, I'm going to send it to you, and I'm going to follow up right after that to make sure you got it and walk through and make sure you understand it. If you needed to edit it because you realized something wasn't quite right, you would just click edit and you'd be good to go. So, that being the case, we're going to go back to proposals, and we're going to take a look at a contract. It's going to look pretty much the same, you will see, but there are some differences, as we talked about. Now, when it pulls up the contract page, you'll see the top is the same. It's going to have information it's going to pull in. The difference is now we need to fill in a sales consultant that has a home improvement salesperson's license. So if that would be you, you type in your name, you type it right on this screen. It's not a default that fills in by itself. You would put the license number over here, and then you would have both your license number and the company licenses. Again, it's going to pull in all this info. Wherever you see these brackets, you know that that's information coming right from CoConstruct. You don't touch those areas. As you scroll down, you'll see you have the same choices here that you had on the proposal. We're going to leave it this way. Again, if they just bought the Tier 1 and it's just bottom line price, you wouldn't have these clicked. You would just have the spec and selections. You would still have the selection schedule. You would still have the allowance summary. Those are important pages. But now at the bottom, instead of just that little bit about if you're looking for financing or you're ready to move forward, we actually have the contract. And this contract breaks down in different sections what is covered and what's not and how it all works. So that's something you would leave. You also will have a payment schedule now. Now, if it's a 203K, this payment schedule is simply going to say, and you have to manually do that here. It's simply going to say a series of draws. If we know it's 5, we'd say 5 or up to 5, and you wouldn't put percentages in here. It would still bring the total price in at the bottom. If it's a cash job, there's different levels of payments depending on the size of the job. Up to a certain level, this is the payment schedule. Up to if it's more, we break it into a little bit more payments. We're going to talk about how to come up with a payment schedule in a later video, so I don't want to get into that too much, but this is where it's going to break it down by percentage of the project and how much they're going to pay. And we could actually put right into those, if we know the project is a certain dollar amount and we know the 40%, we could put 40% of the project and in parentheses put a dollar amount. that's something you might want to do as well, so they understand where the deposit is. We actually do, at the signing of contract, we actually do a 5% deposit. So I still have to go in and update this template to carry it over. So it would say initial deposit 5% at signing, balance of deposit prior to work beginning would be 35%, then inspections at 75%, whatever. However it's worded and broken down by that project, you'd see it that way. You don't change anything in anything that has the brackets, you would leave alone. Again, some more warranty information and legal mumbo jumbo. Total price comes up again. How they can cancel the contract. They have a 3-day right of rescission, it's called. They actually could turn around and, in those 3 days and say, I'm canceling, I don't want it, I want my 5% deposit back, and we have to give it by law. And they would actually have to sign the contract saying that they wanted to cancel the transaction. And then as you go down, you'll see that their signature lines are now included, and we're requesting electronic signatures. So they're going to get the contract and they're going to go through it. And when they get to the bottom, there's going to be a place for them to click I approve. And with their mouse, they're going to scribble their name. I would get the same thing in this case. You would if it were your contract. And it also says who's going to get the contract by email. If, for example, you hadn't gotten your home improvement salesperson's license yet because you haven't gotten through the first 30 days in the training, and I were to sign this for you, you'd also want to put your name here to get a copy of that. I get a copy of it because I have to sign it. Again, save and preview, and it'll pull it up, and then what you want to do is before you would ever send it out, scroll down. Did it fit? Do you have everything filled in? If you got here like this and you saw that there was nothing in this box, you'd want to go ahead and fill that box in. You'd have to hit edit to do that, but you want to have the boxes filled in. And then you'll see it says, Dear Marie Butterly, that's her name, and it goes down to the specs and selections. This looks exactly like what you saw on the HCA proposal. There's no difference. It's filled in exactly the same. Choices are in there. Selections are in there. All the specs are in there. We scroll down to the bottom here so you can see what they see that's a little bit different. And you'll see now if we would need to revise this. This is actually right. I need to revise that other portion on the template. But the 5%, as we were talking about, initial deposit, balance of deposit, inspections, and the final 5%. If the project was larger, there'd be maybe 5 payments in there instead of 4. Scrolling down, all of this stuff, you'll see it comes up with the base price. It shows that there's still some selections to be made. I would think at this point you'd have those chosen, but I don't want to go in and change anything in Miss Butterly's project because she still has to physically make those. You come down here, you got your allowance page. Again, a really important page for them to have. Some more of the legal information, again, that we saw when we were setting it up. This would have been corrected to match the payment schedule above. So the payment schedule above is what pulls out of the spec and selection template, the specs and selection page. So we'd want to make sure that whatever is in there is accurate because that shows up earlier, and then whatever is in there also matches what you're seeing here. And then you're going to see the total price here. And a little bit more legal stuff. And when you get to the bottom, again, total price, their notice of cancellation, and the place to sign it. Now, if we had sent it for approval, Marie Butterly would have a blue box here that she could scribble in and she could approve it. I would have a box to scribble in and approve it. Once we both approve it, the 3-day clock starts to tick and we're ready to go. In this case, we're not going to send it. We don't really need to edit it, so we're just going to go back real quick. And you can see that both of those are sitting there in draft form. If you get them in there in draft form, but you want to just check on something before you send it out, you can leave them sitting there. If you click on the 3 dots over here, you can then, if you click on the contract over here, you then open it back up. You make your edits, you preview it, and then you go ahead and send it out. So you can always make, when it's in draft form, you can always make an edit. Once you have sent it, you then have to void it to be able to make a change. Go back in, create a new one, and then review it and send it back out. So that's the differences between the two, and that's the thing. So when you're on the phone with them, you're going to be running through all of that. You're then going to click update and estimate so that all the numbers pull in. And once you've gotten comfortable with doing this, and it doesn't take that long to get comfortable, you might actually say to them, give me 2 seconds while we're on this Zoom or Google Meet. I'm going to give you the proposal right now. You could go in, you could have had it in draft form ready to go. After you click update, as you're talking to them, you open up the draft, you click review, make sure it all pulled it in, and boom, send it off to them while they're there. If you've gotten really good at it and they're ready to move forward, Go right to the contract. You could have both ready in a draft form. You could have as many drafts in there as you want to. Have it ready in draft form. Pull up the contract. Listen, while we're on the phone right now, I'm going to send that contract over. I'm going to walk you through how to sign it. I'm going to sign it while we're on the phone. I'm going to get you out a link to be able to pay that 5%, and let's get you in the schedule today because we're booking quickly. We're filling up. I mean, there's a lot of techniques that we're going to teach you as we're going through this training, but the ultimate goal is to get to the point that you can get that contract and the deposit while you're on that HCA call. If you can't, then we will talk about what are the steps to take in making sure that we have that constant contact and that we're constantly front of mind for them and getting to the point where they're ready to sign it. So there's more to come. Hopefully this helps. Again, as you do your first couple, your sales manager is going to do them with you so that we can make sure that it's totally understood. But that's the basics on how to create an HCA proposal or an FHC contract.